Hello, everyone. This is Jill Standish, and I'm here with you to celebrate International Women's Day. And if I look at the theme of International Women's Day globally, it's around choose to challenge, which is a fantastic theme. I mean, we can all choose to challenge and call out gender bias and inequality, and as we celebrate International Women's Day. But for today, for our panel, we decided to take a theme around the art of the ask. And how do you really ask for what you want? How do you advocate for yourself? As we know from our own research, women in particularly tend to lag behind men in this asking for what they want and advocating for themselves. So what we've done is brought together some amazing women. And these women come from the entrepreneurial world. And I think they're going to really shed some light on their careers and where they came from and how they leverage the ability to ask for and advocate for what they wanted. So first we have Kay Koplovitz. Kay founded and was the CEO of USA Networks, and she was the first woman to lead and head a TV network. Now she's the co-founder of Springboard Enterprises, and she is dedicated to accelerating the growth of entrepreneurial companies led by women. As we all know, women have the hardest time getting access to capital. And then we have a mother-daughter team, Carrie and Ashley. Carrie Schrader and her daughter, Ashley Ammons, founder of Mixtros, an event management software application that personalizes networking at events. Boy, do we need that now more than ever. This dynamic mother and daughter duo are the 37th and 38th Black women founders to raise over $1 million in capital. Before CEO of Mixtros, Carrie worked as an HR executive at Fortune 500 companies. So she's got some background in corporate. And Ashley, the marketing branding brains behind the scenes, has worked as an events producer for such top names as Oprah Winfrey, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Jay-Z. And then we have Neha Singh, a CEO and founder of Obsess, which uses virtual reality to enhance shopping for fashion online. Before that, Neha started her career at Google as a software engineer, and she also went on to build Vogue magazine's digital platform. So please welcome our fantastic panel. So let me start by getting into the big question. So I'm going to get the panel going here. So let's set the stage with a little bit of history. And I mean, listen, I remember going to work years and years ago. It was a very different world than it is today. And I want to get Carrie, you talking about your life when you started your career, and I believe it was in HR. So set the stage for us about the ask.
Yes, it was in HR, and it was been a while because I've been devoted to Mixtros now almost 6 years, but the ask back in what I'll call the day, it was hard. It was hard for women to come and ask for, even when FMLA became a legal thing, it was hard to ask because you didn't want to remove yourself from your career. It was fine and okay to take off a day or two, but to be able to ask for something extensive or to really approach someone and ask for a raise or promotion, you really, it was more of a heads down and hope that you're noticed, because if you ruffle too many feathers, then that created its own issue all by itself.
Yeah, you know, and when I'm talking about the ask, there's a lot of different asks here, right? It's asking for a raise, asking for time off. So we're going to get into more of these as well. But Kay, since you are such a woman who's been a CEO and sometimes the only CEO at that table, why don't you talk a little bit about this as well? Over to you, Kay.
Well, I think it's really important when you take your seat at the table, and you should, that you treat yourself as an equal to other people at the table. And I've realized that you really have to love the sound of your own voice. And what do I mean by that? Women so often have men overtalk them and give them leeway to do that. But we can't do that if we want to be accepted as equals. Let me illustrate briefly. If you remember Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, you may remember her booming voice as she spoke. But I will tell you, if you met her at a cocktail party or just sat next to her at a luncheon, she would be talking to you just as I am talking to you right now. But when she got up to speak, she didn't sound this way. She boomed out her voice and she made it really sound loud and low. And she practiced that because when she first started running for office, she was overtalked all the time. She said, I've got to change. And she changed the way she projected her voice, and it completely changed her trajectory before being elected. So women have to learn to do that. And you can practice it yourself. You can practice listening to yourself. So just a tip.
Yeah, what great advice. I can't tell you how many times being in a conference room with so many leaders, and you're right, you sometimes do get talked over. And I think that's great advice as to, take a stance and actually like your voice. Amazing. So now over to the next question. I think a lot of us on those annual reviews, we kind of wait and expect things to happen to us because we think we deserve it. But I think the question here is, how do you take control of that situation? And Ashley, you've got a great story of how you took control every year with your boss.
Absolutely. So when I started in New York, I started as an executive assistant. And one thing I had going for me, certainly over the course of my career, is that my mom is an HR executive. And so I always had someone strong in my corner giving me guidance. So I think that proves the value of mentorship, whether it's someone in your family or outside of your family. And when I started the job, I knew that executive assistant was not my end goal. It was a way to get my foot in the door. And so knowing that, I was very actionable about every calendar year. I would put my review on my boss's calendar. We didn't talk about it. I didn't ask for it. I sent him the calendar appointment. And even if he had to shift things around or it had to move because of scheduling, I was diligent about making sure that it happened within a certain time frame because, frankly, it was important. And when I went into those meetings, I came very prepared. I came prepared with what people who were like me were making, the value that I was driving for the business, and I was ready to have those discussions. I was well educated on what I was proposing to him, so it all made sense. But the other side of this is you can't always expect a yes, even if you come prepared. So if the answer is a no, that's okay, but you should also plan for that as well. What does a no mean to you? If you think that your value is not being recognized, are you ready to make that move? And so I think preparing yourself always for both sides of the equation is a huge way to go into these different situations that can be uncomfortable, strong from a position of strength rather than not. So that's my advice for everyone. Understand what you're doing, understand what that means for the organization, and don't be afraid to have those conversations.
You said it so eloquently, knowing what your value is and then taking charge and putting it on your boss's calendar and being prepared to walk, right? If he doesn't say yes. Neha, over to you. Let's get your voice in the room. Why don't you share a little bit of example on this question about asking for the value or confirming the value you have in the organization?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in terms of your value being recognized, it can be in a number of different ways, right? We talked about raises, about getting a promotion. It can also be about increased responsibility in your current role, and that's kind of maybe a precursor to those other two items. So for me, an example kind of story in that is in one of my roles, I was managing the product team, but I also wanted to manage the design team as well. I thought it made sense. I could do it. I loved working with design. And so how do you go and ask for that? Like, okay, now I also want to manage this additional team. And I think you have to build a case and you have to build it over time. And a part of it is like, you have to talk about why this would benefit the person who has to make the decision, like frame it in their context. So it's almost like selling something. It's like selling a product where you don't just want to talk about the product you do, but you also want to talk about how it benefits you, right? So in this case, it's like, how did it benefit my manager if I was also able to manage the design team? And of course, you have to talk about like prove that you can do it and say that you want to do it. I think one of the most important things is like they don't know what you want unless you tell them. And I think what I realized many times was that if you're asking for reasonable things, like most people are reasonable, and you will surprisingly or rather unsurprisingly, you will get what you want and you just have to ask for it.
All right, I'm going to switch to one of my favorite topics. And this is a little bit of a risk on my part because I'm talking to 4 entrepreneurial women who are charting their destiny, not in a corporate setting, but as an entrepreneur and a founder. And that's this whole idea of imposter syndrome. And, imposter syndrome they say, is pretty real. And it comes across especially more for women, and by the way, women of color. And a lot of it has to do with it when they're looking upward, they're not seeing role models that look like them. And so they feel like they have to be different, or, how do I, so this imposter syndrome is real, by the way. And it's not a bad thing. It's actually something to acknowledge. As a matter of fact, when I changed roles from firm to firm, a lot of times I felt imposter syndrome, like they hired me and they're paying me a great amount of money to come and do this role. What if they find out that I'm not worthy? And so that feeling of I'm not worthy is really in a lot of women out there. Now, I know what you're going to tell me, guys. You're probably going to say, no, you guys don't have it. But if you could reach back, tell us some stories of maybe how you had imposter syndrome and maybe what you did to overcome it. So let me start with you, Carrie.
Wow, that's an awesome question. And I'll say, even crossing over into entrepreneurship, I left the comforts of a 25-year-long HR role that I really knew what I thought I knew what was going on, and was told that I knew what was going on, and really highly respected. And to cross over into entrepreneurship as a non-technical tech co-founder often put me in rooms where I automatically would shrink, because I'm used to being a subject matter expert. And when I would do that, people would oblige me like, oh, okay, if you don't want to be part of the conversation, we're going to kind of exclude you. And so it really was that point of, you get to a point in life, and even in corporate, that you see that even the people you may idolize, and that could be a strong word, they too have weaknesses. And to some point, people do fake it until they make it. Now, we hope that that's not a large stretch, but everybody has to learn something. And when you can forgive yourself for making a mistake and also be willing to admit it and move on, don't let that mistake be the destiny or your new title that you've put on for yourself. Because even as we are in entrepreneurship, Ashley and I often remind ourselves that Google did not start off as the Google we know, or the Apple that we know, or Ford Motor Company, where I have roots. It didn't start off into all of these vehicle operation facilities that we see today. And so we have to give ourselves that grace and expect it from others. And when you do not get it, you need to pull back and ask them why.
So true, so true. And to follow up on that, let me go to your daughter here. And so, Ashley, I don't know, have you ever had imposter syndrome?
I would say it really started with the entrepreneurial journey, because it's something different. I think when you're in a corporate career, you find your footing among a larger team. When you're in a company that you founded yourself, oftentimes you're with yourself or you're with your co-founder. And so, what I would say there is, make sure to find your people. Like, everybody needs people, the people who get them, feel them, support them, understand what they're going through, the people that are going to be your allies. I think that works for both entrepreneurship and inside of corporate. My person is my mom. So it's great that she's my mom, but she's also my co-founder. So I respect her greatly from a business perspective as well. And what we found is, the moment that we actually leaned into who we actually are and stopped trying to fit into someone else's, what they thought an entrepreneur should be, that's when things started really clicking for us. Authenticity will take you a long way. So what I would say to women listening to this, instead of walking into rooms and feeling as if you need to adjust, allow everyone to adjust to you and see how that goes.
What a great way to, absolutely love that. So let me switch to Kay. I'm going to ask you a different question, Kay, because imposter syndrome sometimes just doesn't go with you. I don't know why. But I'm wondering if you could talk to the team, especially, this is a big one around, you all have asked and gone up in front of investors. And you're asked, this is a big ask. So you're not just asking for their approval, and you're asking for them as a head nod to acknowledge your idea. You're asking them to invest. You're asking them to give you money. So Kate, talk a little bit about how that asking for money or capital give this team some advice.
Well, I think it's very important to kind of center yourself and what you think about yourself in that process. I will tell you that when we first started out with Springboard Growth Capital, and we went out to people to ask them to invest in companies that we were investing in, I actually was reticent to go to some of my very close friends about it, because it felt like I didn't want to violate a friendship. And, I really had to think about it. And it took me about a year to think about it, really. But I wasn't really asking them to give money. I was offering them the opportunity to invest in something that was really spectacular. And you have to sort of, whether you're inside a corporation and you're asking for something there, or you're an entrepreneur, you really have to look at it as you are presenting an opportunity to someone. And if they don't see the opportunity, great, fine, thanks, okay, move on. You get a lot of no's anyway.
And so, Ashley, you are actually going up and asking or giving an opportunity for people to invest in your idea. So talk a little bit about how you approach that.
Yeah, with confidence now, I mean, I would echo what Kay said. So when my mom and I first started going out to raise capital, one, it was very new for us, because my mom and I, in our life, we didn't say, oh, we really want to be entrepreneurs. We were actually quite successful in our careers. We were both making good money, very comfortable. It took a willingness to get very uncomfortable to lean into what this new journey was going to be. When we first started our journey, people would literally refer to my mom and I as quad outsiders. They said, you're Black, you're female, you're non-technical, and you founded a tech company. And oh, by the way, your mom's not a millennial. And I was like, well, yes, that's to be expected. But we had all these hurdles to seemingly jump to get our business where it was going. And we found literally it wasn't until we got comfortable with ourselves, and again, not going to people to say, will you please do this for me? But this is an opportunity for you. We've seen something that others haven't. It's time for you to get in. It's always the excitement versus hesitation game. When you go to people for something like this, you need to create excitement. If they feel that you have any hesitation in what you're saying, that's going to make them put the brakes on. So when you're going to something, when you're pitching something, when you're bringing forth a new idea for a team, whatever it may be, you need to be excited about it. You need to believe in it, and you need to go into it with that kind of tenacity.
Yeah, and I mean, you and Kay both talked about you're offering up an opportunity, but you're also making sure they understand your idea and your vision and your passion behind it, right? Because you're actually trying to portray that. I think Neha, you've got an example of how to do this, since you came from corporate and then went into asking for capital. So why don't you share your story?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the biggest learnings, and something I'm still trying to learn, is that when asking for capital, investors or whoever, they want to be inspired by your vision. So you have a current product, you have a current state of things that you're doing, which is fine, which is one aspect of it. But really, the bigger aspect, like ultimately, we're all human and we want to be inspired. And just in terms of the market size of what you're doing, you have to paint that picture of the much bigger vision beyond what might be the one application of your technology or of your company at the moment. And I think that's a difficult thing. And in general, I would say that, yeah, maybe women are not as good at or not as, it doesn't come as naturally to them to paint, a bigger vision and a bigger picture of what they're doing. For me, maybe I thought, like, as an engineer, it doesn't come natural to me because I'm very much about like what's real. But I think that's a really, really important part of the story of exactly what Ashley was saying, like about it, making them excited is not just kind of what you have now, but what is the potential What is the full picture, and make it as big as possible, right? Because when everybody else pitches, they don't try to say like, okay, we can do this one little piece and then the next little piece. They're like, yeah, we can conquer it all. And I think that's how you like really ask, and I think it takes time to like learn to do that, and it takes a lot of practice to be comfortable with that.
I think you guys are bringing up some fantastic themes. And Ashley, you basically said that your mom and you weren't qualified when you went over to this tech entrepreneurial world that you're in. And Carrie, how did you get over that?
Oh, I mean, again, I do think it's something about being a non-millennial that even made it harder, because I worked very hard to be at the top of my game. So I earned a master's degree while I was working with small children in the house. And I was used to working, doing the right stuff and getting the right outcome, and then getting the praise associated with it, whether it was verbal, financial, a promotion, what have you. So I have to say, early on, I was truly off of my game. And you keep in mind, I hang with a millennial, so I kind of had lost my swag. And what I had to do was, again, look around at the competition. And I'm just talking about the people in front of you that you always have that feeling. Sometimes you have that feeling that everybody knows more than you do. But if you're just quiet for a minute, you'll really find out they don't know as much that they're talking about. And you actually may know a little more because of your nervousness and being intimidated. You actually did more research.
As we're talking about, asking for capital, whether you're asking for capital or asking for a deal or signing, for those of us who are in consulting, we're asking for, after, going in for orals, we're actually asking the client to, for their approval to move forward. So we're asking for a signing. So I'm going to ask you, Kate, first. How do we ask for the deal or close the deal?
Well, I think, from me, my perspective on doing deals, and hundreds and hundreds of them in my career, is really a win-win situation. And when you create the right environment for when the other person or the other firm, the other company, whatever, you got to understand what their bottom line is, what they must have, not just what they would like to have, but what they must have and what you must have. And then you've got the things that you would like to have. So you've got some things that are negotiable, some things aren't. And when you really, from my perspective, when you understand that and really offer, the type of deal, whether it's a, investment deal or signing a contract, you really get to the cadence of when you need to, really start closing, really laying out what is the must-have for each side and say, we can make this happen. We can both walk away with what we need to have. In your own words, the way you do it, it's the way I always did negotiation. That was my perspective on it, and it turned out pretty well. So yeah. I would say that, I was up against guys in Hollywood. I was up against guys in the sports field, big personalities. They would think they could crush you. No, they can't, because as Ashley said earlier on, you got to know when to walk, when to talk, and when to walk.
Neha, you've got a perspective on this one. How do you actually ask for the deal?
One thing at the end of the day, like especially as a startup, and you're trying to sell your product, and you're always in sort of the lower or the smaller position because you're this like tiny company. And so you always feel intimidated by, larger customers. But what I realized was that if you believe that they need you more than you need them, then that's where your strongest position comes from. And it's pretty much similar to what, Kay and Ashley were saying, that if you're prepared to walk away, and it can't be a bluff, like it actually has to be the case. So you have to be mentally prepared for it not to happen. And if it doesn't happen, you'll be fine. Like if you think through the rest of the use case, like just because you are kind of smaller at the moment, or you have something that's new, or you're competing against like much bigger competitors, ultimately, if you believe in your product and believe in yourself, then you know that, they need you more than you need them. And then after that, it's really about, what Kay said, and figuring out the specifics that will make it happen.
Great. And I'm going to turn it to both Carrie and Ashley. I don't care which one jumps in. Let's see what happens here. But so who's the one who really goes in at the end after you prove the value, you're getting the nod? Who's the one who closes the deal? Is it mom or daughter?
My mom and I really stay in our lane, so to speak. So like my mom is the CEO of the company for a reason. I am the COO of the company for another reason. That means I am client facing. It's funny, over the course of this journey, I've just gotten more straightforward. I don't know if it's because I'm just like tired now. I'm like lacking time. Like, I don't know what it is, but like, I just try to cut to the chase. I used to find when I was earlier in this journey, like I would kind of go with the customer is always right. Like I need to be saying whatever they do. I need to be like running all over the place for myself. And then I got to a point where I'm like, there's a lot of customers out here. There's a lot of potential customers out here. And you have to know, even with the customer, when is too much. Give them the space to come back to you when they need you. I think a lot of this, this closing the deal and whatnot, it is built on human relationships. The business that we've built, Mixtros, is all about human connection and human relationships. If you're able to establish an actual connection to someone, that closing the deal conversation shouldn't feel so awkward because you're setting yourself up for success along the way.
Yeah, and all of you are kind of saying the same thing, which is really when it gets to, if you've done your homework, if you've built that long-term relationship, if you know what you're doing and you've proved your value, the ask shouldn't be that hard. It shouldn't be awkward. It should be a natural progression of the relationship. And so I think sometimes
you could just think of it as a gift.
Yeah, it's a gift. I love that. It's not an ask, it's a gift. This is my gift to you. You're doing business with us. That's our gift. So I think in the interest of time, I'm going to give you guys we're going to do one question, and this can be as personal as you want to make it or as professional as you want to make it. It's up to you. But since the theme of this is choose to challenge, and by the way, I think we've all come out of a year that has been kind of crazy with challenges. But if you want to choose to challenge looking forward, name one thing that you're going to challenge in the year ahead. So let's start with you, Neha.
So I'm going to challenge myself to think bigger and speak about my bigger vision. It's related to what I was saying earlier.
Perfect. Set that big vision. How about you, Kay?
I want to learn sort of new ways of financing businesses, new ways in getting more capital behind women entrepreneurs, which is where I focus. And I think it's just going to be, everything is in chaos around the financing world right now. And that means there are great opportunities. It means there are a lot of openings. Things are not static. There's a lot of capital out there, folks.
Great. Thanks, Kay. Ashley, what are you going to challenge this year?
I'm going to challenge that it's taboo for women in particular to say no. I think no is a very powerful word and we don't use it often enough. I think that we just always try to say yes, 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 yes to everything that's coming our way. And I'm going to challenge myself to have a filter so that my cups can be full on the work side of things, on the life side of things, on the health side of things. So I'm just going to challenge myself to use the word no when necessary.
Oh, especially when we're talking about setting boundaries, since we're all living at work.
That's right.
So, Carrie, what about you?
Well, just for the record, that no does not pertain to me, but I do understand what she's trying to get across. Mine is very personal, and I continue to challenge myself and other women and people specifically. I am a breast cancer survivor, was diagnosed during this journey of entrepreneurship. And had I changed that mammogram to meet Ashley in another city, which we were actually doing, my whole life could be different. So I am well, I am good. I've just gotten done with 5 years of oral therapy, boom, boom, boom. But again, I say, we tend to put everything in front of ourselves. And even at work, I mean, there was times when I was working at my corporate job, my schedule was tight. It was like, oh, I'm going to change that appointment. And then before you knew it, it was 2 years that went by. And even when I share this with other professional women and entrepreneurs, it's like, wow, I haven't had that since I gave birth, or I didn't feel anything, so I think I'm good. So my challenge is to myself to continue to try to be healthy, if I can ever drink all of this water, and to challenge other people. seriously, put your health first.
Well, first, I want to thank some fantastic panelists. I mean, I hope you'll agree with me that some of their stories were just so rich and just so real. And I think we can all agree that there's great nuggets of advice coming from 4 successful women. The other thing I wanted to share with you is that this is a time to really think about challenging the status quo. I will tell you, for one, my challenge is going to be around keeping authenticity and this level of humanity at work. If you think about it, we're all living at work. If I think about how this is different between now and when I started my career, and I did work at home because I was in consulting, but I would hide the fact that I had children. And because I was a working woman and I wanted to make sure that I was thought of very professionally. And yet think of that now. I mean, all of the calls that we've been on, folks, kids are coming in, dogs are barking, even husbands, whatever, it doesn't matter. And the fact that we actually get to know one another a little bit better because of that. I get to see your family, I get to see where you live, et cetera. So my challenge is to keep that alive. So with that, I want to say thanks to all of you for watching. I hope it was inspiring as it was for me to meet some of these great women, and enjoy your day. Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks to our panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.